Welcome to this evening's webinar on managing ME/CFS symptoms through diet. Before I kind of get going, it would just be interesting to see if we could just have a quick sound check. Sometimes we have a few issues with our internet at this end. So there's a small chat box down the bottom. If you can hear me, which I hope you can, excellent. That's what I like to see. I've got a couple of people writing in now, so great. So that means that everything's working from my end. So hopefully this should all run very smoothly. Brilliant. Okay, so just before I start, my contact details will be at the end on the end screen, so you can contact me directly if you've got any questions. I will answer any of the questions at the end of the webinar, if that's all right. And the slides will be available to anybody who wants a copy, and there will be a recording of the webinar as well. So if you kind of miss anything, then you can kind of catch up. So you can contact me, or you can get the slides or anything like that. So, so tonight I'm going to talk about ME and CFS, and with sort of respect to sort of diet, I'll talk a little bit about supplements as well, and sort of how to eat and how to eat. For some of you, it's about sort of money and things like that. So there'll be a sort of aspect of how to eat well for less and how to eat well to help manage your symptoms. And just before I kind of start, it's very difficult sometimes because some people sort of call it myalgic encephalomyelitis, other people call it chronic fatigue syndrome, and I'll probably sort of switch from one to the other throughout the talk. So I think with sort of myalgic encephalomyelitis, it tends to really kind of concentrate on all of the symptoms that are involved, because we know that there's sort of chronic fatigue, but we also know that there's things like immune dysfunction, there's sort of issues with inflammation as well on top. And actually, if I go to my next slide, so these are the kind of areas that I'm going to be talking about. So what I will do to start with is I'll just give a sort of brief overview of these four sort of key areas. And hopefully this will sort of provide some information on how we can relate diet in sort of modulating some of the symptoms that arise from these key four areas. So we know that the condition is associated with suppressed immune function. We know that there is excessive amounts of sort of free radicals, which create inflammation. We know that there is an inadequate sort of source of energy. So there is what's called poor mitochondrial function. So mitochondria are the small little powerhouses that exist within our cells that create the energy currency that we need to carry out everyday functions. And quite predominantly, chronic fatigue syndrome, ME, seems to be associated with this sort of constant viral infection. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview. It won't last too long, but hopefully it will sort of provide the building blocks to understand how diet can sort of help. So before we talk about diet, we'll just sort of give an overview of what sort of treatments are sort of covered with treating chronic fatigue syndrome, ME. I haven't listed all of them, but I've just sort of given you an example of the sort of diversity. If you go to see your GP, you'll probably be given things like painkillers and antidepressants, and it's a bit of a shame because there isn't a sort of single well-established treatment for treating this sort of horrendous condition. So it's kind of a combination between sort of standard sort of pharmaceuticals, and then we have things like exercise therapy, and there's a lot of very good evidence to support exercise and pacing. Also CBT is quite good, and then we work quite closely with a very nice gentleman called Raymond Perrin, who has developed a very a very good technique called the Perrin technique, obviously named after himself, which is a very specific lymphatic massage therapy, which is very good for sort of getting the lymph system up and running and getting rid of all the sort of toxins and viruses and things like that. And quite often people would sort of take on other sort of therapies alongside it as a sort of overall sort of holistic treatment. If you go to see your GP, unless you have a very good GP, it's very unlikely that they will give you any kind of advice on nutrition. And this is quite frustrating when we consider that the food that we eat provides the building blocks for cellular function. It provides the building blocks for all the proteins and the fats and everything that we need to survive daily. The food we eat influences our brain function. It influences our mood, influences how well we sort of utilize energy. It's also important because living with CFS-ME can have a significant impact on how we eat. So not only on our appetite, but our eating habits. Many people find that even preparing food itself can be quite exhausting. But if we become malnourished, then we're not going to get better. So part of the sort of emphasis really is on the importance of eating and the importance of eating well. A lot of people sort of lose interest in cooking or have sort of other symptoms, sort of both physical and emotional, that can sort of just impact the whole sort of process of sort of cooking and eating. If you are taking any sort of standard pharmaceuticals, one of the sort of commonly prescribed one is antidepressants, such as SSRIs. And that's not necessarily because you may be feeling depressed, although it's not uncommon. But serotonin uptake inhibitors or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors are actually quite good for sort of helping people with sleep issues. They're very good as antidepressants as well, but they can help with pain management. But sometimes they can present with some side effects that can affect things like appetite. They can make us gain weight. They can make us lose weight. There are other sort of side effects that sometimes can make us question the sort of the efficiency or the sort of the risks and the benefits of sort of taking some of these sort of pharmaceutical drugs. So we need to start sort of looking at sort of other alternatives to sort of managing our symptoms. Okay, so we'll have a quick chat about viral infections. Now, ME/CFS is thought to arise from a persistent viral infection, and there are many different types of viruses that are sort of involved. Glandular fever, for example, is quite common. So quite often, before sort of diagnosis is made, a lot of people will just sort of feel run down. They'll get sort of flu-like symptoms, and then they just never seem to kind of get better. And the thing with viral infections is once you've got a virus, we sort of develop something called a subclinical infection. And viruses can actually lay dormant in the body for very long periods of time. So they don't even necessarily sort of result in symptoms, if you like. And I think a very good way of giving an example is issues with cold sores, for example. Now, the cold sore, the sort of classic cold sore, is induced by a particular type of herpes virus, so HSV1 or HSV2. And if you are susceptible to developing cold sores, what you will find is that generally they kind of tend to spring up when you're feeling rather run down. So when your immune system is a bit depleted, if you're feeling a little bit under the weather, you are more likely to go on and develop a virus. Develop a cold sore, because the virus sort of takes hold and it takes advantage of the fact that your immune system is a little bit sluggish. Another really excellent example is chickenpox. So chickenpox is caused by the herpes varicella zoster virus. Most of us tend to get chickenpox when we're very, very young. It comes, it goes, and we kind of forget about it. But the virus lays very dormant, And then again, when our immune system is particularly compromised, the old chickenpox virus can then spring up again and result in shingles. So there's some sort of classic examples of how these sort of viruses can lay really dormant. Now, we do actually have a very well-established immune system. So if our immune system isn't sort of compromised, then generally we should be able to deal with things like sort of pathogens such as bacteria and viruses. And we have two different forms of immunity. So we have what's called a cellular immunity. It's called a Th1. And this type of immunity directs very specialized cells. And there's lots of different cells, but just as an example, cells called natural killer T cells are directed straight to the viruses or straight to the bacteria or the other type of pathogens at the site of infection. And this is important because it's inside cells. So these type of microorganisms are found within the cells themselves. And they kind of get this battle up and running, and we deal with that. Humoral immunity, which is the Th2, actually results in the production of antibodies. And these are used to neutralize sort of foreign invaders and substances that are found outside of the body. So the immune system tends to sort of fluctuate between the two. So there's a balance between Th1 and Th2. However, when an immature immune cell is exposed to a virus, we should see a Th1 response. However, viruses are rather clever, and some viruses are able to deceive the immune system, and they con it into thinking that the invading threat is not actually coming from a virus. The immune system then doesn't sort of respond in a typical sort of Th1-like response, and this allows the virus to remain hidden. And over time, it can arise an infection that becomes either active or chronic. So it can remain dormant, but basically the immune system doesn't always recognize that there is viral exposure. And this is what we see in chronic fatigue syndrome, ME. And what's interesting is that ME CFS patients, so we've got our little killer T cell up here that's supposed to go off and find all these little viruses within our cells. But ME CFS patients tend to have, or they sort of exhibit these changes in the immune system that increases their susceptibility to viral infections. And we find that numbers of these killer T cells are really, really low in people with ME and CFS. So they just don't have the ability to make, they don't have the ability to deal with viral infections, even if they could. So why is this? Well, one of the reasons is linked to stress. Now, when we think of stress, anything that sort of exhibits a sort of stress response, what makes you feel stressed? What makes you feel stressed, sorry. So anything from things like moving house to, being in debt, having job worries, having exams, getting married, getting divorced, even having things like, not having things like that, having children, for example. There are so many things that absolutely bombard us with stress. When we are stressed, we produce catecholamines, which impact on various parts of the body. When we feel stressed, we actually have a sort of inbuilt mechanism to deal with it, and it's called the Hpa Axis. So the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal cortex, Hpa Axis, and it functions to produce something called cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Now, if you're totally bombarded with stress all the time, what eventually happens is that you lose the ability to make cortisol, and this then suppresses our immunity. So when we talk about stress, stress is absolutely fine. We need a little bit of stress, and there are different types of stress. So there's the sort of immediate stresses that sort of occur rapidly. They have a very obvious onset and offset. So the things that sort of prime us to deal with sort of with sort of emergencies, if you like. But it's the chronic stressors that are ongoing that don't have a clear endpoint that are really the issue here. And so we sort of talk about chronic stress. When we are chronically stressed, we get overstimulation of our Hpa axis, our inbuilt mechanism that normally lets us deal with stressful situations. As a consequence of this, we get huge amounts of cortisol. Initially, when we produce too much of this stress hormone, it's actually quite inflammatory. It's quite damaging to the brain, and I'll talk about that in a minute. High levels of cortisol actually can, over time, increase inflammation. And then we get this sort of increase in sort of destructive compounds, our free radicals that increase inflammation through sort of oxidative stress, for example. We then start to see issues within the brain itself. So we get things like neurotransmitters are affected, things like serotonin, our happy hormone, other ones called GABA and dopamine. These are all play a role in sort of emotion and cognitive function and mood and sleep and all these kind of things. We also get changes in brain structure and function. And as an example, if we look at sort of brain scans of people with fibromyalgia, with people with CFS, ME, and we compare them to sort of what we would consider to be sort of like normal, healthy control, so people who don't have these conditions, what we find is that there are certain areas in the brain that are responsible for things like sort of sleep and mood and that kind of thing, that are slightly smaller. So if you've got this condition, and we find it in people who are depressed as well, quite interestingly. And so we can kind of almost say that having these conditions, that the sort of chemical changes that we see can literally make parts of your brain shrink. And that then starts to come through in the symptoms that we see. So we see things like decreased appetite, certainly in depression. We see weight loss, fatigue, sleep disturbances, impaired cognitive ability, so brain fog, and it can cause anxiety and depressed mood. So stress has a huge impact on the way that we sort of feel in ourselves. So we start to sort of see lots of sort of physiological symptoms, if you like. Okay, so what about fatigue? Right, okay, so our bodies require energy, and we get the energy from the food that we eat. So we have our diet, which is our fuel. Our diet is composed of carbohydrate, which gets broken down into glucose. We have dietary fat, which is broken down into fatty acids. Our proteins get broken down into amino acids, and they all kind of get shuttled off into our cells, and they are taken up by our mitochondria, and our mitochondria turn them into something called ATP. And ATP is our energy currency. So we need ATP, and we need lots of ATP just to function. And if we think about, for example, the amount of ATP that our heart needs, our heart pumps lots and lots and lots of times a minute, for example. I don't know quite how many, but so our heart has very high energy requirements. Any muscle has a very high energy requirement. And so we've got lots of mitochondria in there, and it produces vast amounts of ATP. If you don't produce very much ATP, this is where we start to sort of see fatigue and poor energy. And so this is where it gets a little bit technical, but I'll try to keep it sort of relatively light for you. So our mitochondria, our little energy powerhouses, make our energy currency ATP. The actual reserves of ATP within our cells are quite low, and we have to continually recycle it to keep the cells supplied with energy. If our cells are not very efficient at recycling ATP, then our cells can run out of energy. And this causes things like symptoms of weakness and poor stamina, because the cell has to wait until more ATP can be produced. So it's kind of, if you use it up really quickly, you have to wait around so that the body can make more by recycling. However, if you don't have ATP available, the body can start to use another molecule called ADP. The body can create energy from ADP, but unlike ATP, we can't recycle it. So you have to make it from scratch. You have to make ADP from a certain sort of list of ingredients, so a sort of shopping list, if you like. And if any of you guys are sort of aware of Dr. Sarah Myhill and her work with chronic fatigue and ME, she'll recommend a sort of a cooking list of ingredients, for example, that are known to be incredibly efficient for increasing energy. And these include things like D-ribose, coenzyme Q10, acetylcarnitine, magnesium B12, and so on. I'll talk a little bit more about this later on in the webinar, and I'll be talking a lot more about sort of foods that we can sort of eat as well, and where we can find some of these core ingredients. So we have viral infections, we have immune system issues, we've got inflammation, we've got poor mitochondrial function, and we can start to see how all of these issues, all of these sort of areas can start to account for many of the symptoms that are associated with ME and CFS. So we've got the sort of post-exertional malaise, we've just got the general fatigue all the time, being unable to sleep, cognitive function, and so on. So, if we want to manage the symptoms of CFS-ME, we need to make sure that we support our immune function. We need to be able to feed our mitochondria. We need to be able to support brain function. We need to make sure that we don't eat inflammatory foods so that we can reduce body inflammation. And another key area, which I haven't really touched on, but I will talk about a little bit later, is that we need to support gut function. Because this is another kind of side effect, if you like, of having CFS-ME, and everybody's symptoms are very different, and not everybody has the same symptoms or has the same kind of severity of symptoms, but many people with CFS-ME also have sort of issues with sort of gut function as well. So maybe sort of IBS or leaky guts syndrome, and a lot of this can be sort of linked back to sort of gut inflammation. So we need to support gut function, and I'll talk about that in a moment, sort of through maybe some supplements and some dietary changes. Right, okay, so let's talk about some nutrients, and the first one I'm going to really cover is omega-3. Because if you've got a virus and you've got a dormant virus, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to stop you from making long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. So I've given you a very simplistic idea of what and where we source omega-3s from. So you're probably sort of all aware of them because they come out in the media an awful lot, and sometimes we're told they're good for us and other times they're told they're probably not, but I would suggest that you ignore the latter because they are good for you. So we have different types of omega-3. We have what we call short chain, which are found in plants. When we eat short chain, so things like flaxseed oil and sort of green veg and things like that, we, in the body, use this enzyme here to make it into long chain fatty acids. The other alternative is that you can eat these fatty acids directly through fish and seafood. But if you're depending on this fatty acid, then you need this enzyme to work. Now, this enzyme is not awfully efficient at the best of times, but what viruses do is they kind of basically disable delta-6 desaturase. So, unless you're eating seafood and fish or taking a fish oil supplement, then it's likely that your EPA and DHA levels are going to be compromised. Why is this important? because EPA and DHA play a really important role in modulating things like brain function. So DHA, for example, is the major omega-3 fatty acid within your brain. EPA and DHA are also really important for cardiovascular function. So they keep things like cholesterol in check. They look after blood pressure. They look after triglycerides. They keep everything functioning nice and sort of efficiently. They're also really good blood thinners as well. So they're very good for sort of increasing the circulation so that our nutrients can get to all the aspects and areas of our body, and we can get rid of all the toxin waste and things like that. But EPA and DHA are also involved in immune function. They help to keep our immune function functioning properly. But probably most importantly, EPA and DHA are involved in inflammatory regulation, and EPA in particular is enormously anti-inflammatory. So, what other factors can compromise our EPA and DHA levels? Well, it's our little friend cortisol. This is our stress hormone. So if you're already compromised and you're already stressed, then it's likely that your omega-3s are going to be more compromised. Also things like alcohol, high intake of saturated fat. And if you're not getting your 5 a day, then you're probably not getting enough vitamins and minerals either. So all of these things are going to sort of factor in as well. And then there's our friend caffeine. So when we're feeling a little bit tired, the first thing we do is go and put the kettle on, make ourselves a cup of coffee. But caffeine also influences delta-6 desaturates. There's other things as well, but I've sort of listed some of the important things. So omega-3s are really important. So and what's quite interesting actually is that EPA, our primary anti-inflammatory omega-3, is directly virucidal. So it has it eats and destroys viruses. So it's very clever that viruses can find a way to actually stop us making something like EPA that could actually sort of cut their own throats, really, if you like. But there's also other sort of components within our foods that are known to be very good at sort of killing off viruses. So things like garlic, onions, grapeseed extract, licorice root, something called olive leaf, and green tea polyphenols as well. So there's lots of things in green tea actually that I'm going to talk about in a little while that are very, very good as sort of antioxidants, antivirals and that kind of thing. So there are things that we can naturally incorporate into our foods to help us deal with sort of viral loads. Or you can eat more fish. So you can bypass delta-6 desaturates. So you can kind of cheat the virus by actually just skipping the whole step that they're sort of compromising. By increasing your EPA and your DHA, then you are naturally giving yourself anti-inflammatory benefits, and you are giving yourself sort of antiviral benefits as well. Obviously, there are some individuals with CFS ME who are susceptible to sort of heavy toxin loads. So we have to be a little bit careful in sort of making too many recommendations for sort of larger, longer living fish, such as sort of tuna and marlin and that kind of thing, which tend to sort of have the heaviest levels of things like methylmercurins and dioxins. So if you're thinking of eating a little bit more fish, you need to stick to things like sardines and mackerel, small sort of short living fish, or you can just sort of look for a good quality fish oil supplement, and which is especially convenient if you're not really a sort of fish lover. Right, okay. So what about inflammation? And it's quite interesting because I'm going to link through again. I'm going to talk about fats again, but I will go on and talk about some other aspects as well in a minute. But this is really quite important because inflammation is now acknowledged to be sort of predominantly a key driver in many of the sort of chronic conditions that we're seeing. So anything from cardiovascular disease to diabetes, metabolic syndrome, dementia, anything that sort of we can think of, we can sort of see a core of inflammation behind it. And if your omega-3 levels are compromised, then you're going to struggle to switch off an inflammatory response. So, and again, I will keep this nice and simple for you. So when let's just be very clear as well here for a minute. I'm talking about inflammation as if it's a bad thing, but it really isn't. Without an inflammatory response, we wouldn't be able to deal with pathogens at all. We wouldn't be able to overcome infections or anything like that. So we need to have a healthy inflammatory response. And when we think about inflammation, which is perfectly normal, we need it, we can actually divide it into 3 key areas. So it's not like an inflammatory response is something that is just naturally exhaustive. It doesn't just run out. There are set processes and set key things that have to happen. So the first step is called initiation. So this is when the sort of drama strikes. So for example, we get an infection and the body recognizes this and it says, oh my goodness, we must deal with this. And the first thing that happens is that specific types of fat, specific omega-6 fats, produce pro-inflammatory driving products. And these inflammatory messengers go and target specific cells in the body and says, come on guys, we need to get to this point here, we've got a crisis. And so everybody kind of comes together. Once the crisis is kind of dealt with and it's over and it's a bit of an aftermath and it all kind of needs to be cleaned up, we enter what's called the resolution step. For us to do that efficiently, we need to switch off our omega-6, otherwise we just carry on going. And so the next step is that we get something called a sort of signal switch. And it's at this point where our pro-inflammatory products start to drop down because they are replaced by omega-3 products. So these are the omega-3s that I've been talking about, and this is predominantly EPA with a little bit of DHA. And we need a certain amount of omega-3 within our cells to be able to reach this point here, the stop signal, so that we can then kind of get the whole process done and dusted with through the termination step. The issue is, and our little cortisol molecule here, our little stress hormone, is important because our stress hormone cortisol at this point is actually a goodie. He actually is involved in helping to terminate inflammation. So cortisol is generally thought of as anti-inflammatory unless this bit here doesn't happen, because we carry on producing cortisol and cortisol then becomes inflammatory. So it's all quite sort of understandable at some point, but we'll concentrate on our omega-3s getting to the stop signal, because if you're not producing enough omega-3 fatty acids, what happens is our omega-6 products don't really ever stop being produced, and our omega-3 products never really stop here. So we get something that is called silent inflammation. And it's almost sort of like non-symptomatic. So you're not necessarily feeling ill, you're not necessarily producing any kind of symptoms related to inflammation, but you've never really kind of resolved the initial inflammatory response that occurred. And it's this sort of concept of silent inflammation that is thought to contribute to many of the sort of westernized chronic diseases. And it's not just about omega-3s, it's about other aspects of diet, which I'm going to explain in a minute. And just to sort of finish this part of sort of talking about omega-3s before I go on to the next part, is to sort of really emphasize that this whole sort of theory of low levels of omega-3 playing a role in ME/CFS was sort of published back in sort of 2000 to 2007 by this gentleman here. And he sort of, through various experiments, and he used EPA quite a lot in his own sort of patients to demonstrate that it's this sort of low levels through viral infections that contribute to many of the symptoms that are associated with the condition itself. And so we've got our sort of balance of sort of our omega-3 index, which tells us how much omega-3 we've got. And then we've got this balance of pro-inflammatory. So this is the fatty acid that I was talking about that drives inflammation. And then we've got EPA that sort of is anti-inflammatory, that sort of quells it. It's a sort of pro-resolving. So we have to have a nice balance between these two different types of fat to be able to resolve our inflammatory processes. And again, what we find in people with CFS-ME is that their levels of omega-3 are generally low, but their levels of this fatty acid here are generally high. Okay, so let's talk about how immune function and inflammatory products can affect our brain structure and function. So I was talking earlier about various sort of chemicals that are produced from inflammation and immune function that actually kind of eat away at parts of our brain. And this is sort of being shown as well in chronic fatigue. And it's the changes that occur in CFS that are consistent with impaired memory and so on. So various parts of the brain start to shrink, and this sort of results in some of the symptoms that are associated with cognitive decline and sort of brain fog and things like that. Okay, so let's summarize it. Okay, so we start off with our viral infection. Our viral infection decreases our ability to make omega-3. Our high levels of stress produce cortisol. Cortisol also influences our ability to make omega-3. If you've got low omega-3, then it's likely that you've got increased inflammation. Increased inflammation and cortisol is highly neurotoxic, causes brain changes that then occur in the brain that result in symptoms such as brain fog. Our increased inflammation also shuttles the amino acids that are required to make things like serotonin and melatonin. And these are involved in keeping us happy and making us sleep. So if you don't produce enough serotonin, then it's likely that your levels of anxiety are going to be quite high and your mood will lower. If you're not producing melatonin, then it's likely that you won't be sleeping well. If you are overstressed all the time and you're producing lots of cortisol, eventually your poor old adrenal glands will sort of cut the mustard and they'll say, I can't do this anymore. And you end up with something called adrenal fatigue. And this occurs over like prolonged periods of time when you're exposed to high levels of stress. So you burn out. If you are fatigued adrenally, as it were, it suppresses your immune system. And if you have a suppressed immune system, then your viruses are literally, they're sort of good to go all over again. And then the whole thing kind of happens again. So you can kind of start to see all these sort of like impact on sort of all these sort of contributors and how they can sort of spiral around and end up with all these sort of symptoms. So how does food come into it? How does the food we eat affect all of these pathways, and how can the food that we eat, or changes in the food that we eat and changes in our diet and our choices in diet, help us manage symptoms generally and sort of indirectly? And as you can see, you do have a choice. You can choose to go down the sort of fast food route if you like, or you can go down the slightly healthier route, sorry. Okay, so diet. Let's talk about diet. Right, I've talked about inflammatory diseases, And there is a huge amount of interest in how our lifestyle, how our diet, and how stress, and also about sort of pharmaceutical medical intervention. So the drugs that we take that don't actually necessarily correct things, but they just sort of muffle things. How these prevent our bodies from recovering. So inflammatory diseases are caused by diet, stress, and too much medication half the time. And this is actually, if anybody wants a copy of this paper, it's a little bit technical, but it's really interesting if you can sort of take the time, if you can. I know some people would find sort of reading and things like that really heavy, but it's a good one if you can. And this is a sort of slide. Don't worry too much about it because it's a bit too technical, but it's really here. It's taken from the same paper, and it's really to sort of emphasize that there are factors that exist within our diets. This symbol means omega, so it's omega-6 and omega-3. This glycemic index refers to the kind of carbohydrates that we eat, so things like bread and pasta and vegetables. How much calories we eat. Generally, the majority of us overeat, so we consume far too many calories. And then we've got things called anti-nutrients. And when we talk about anti-nutrients, quite a lot of the time it's not necessarily about what we eat, but it's what we're not eating, or or the foods that we eat that actually do more harm than good. Okay, so all of these things can either have an inflammatory aspect to it, or it can have a resolution. So we can either drive the inflammatory process, or we can actually choose to eat foods that are anti-inflammatory. Okay, so I've just popped this slide in here just to sort of emphasize the interest that is developing in sort of diet. These guys were talking about diet as a prevention for depression. We know that there are a lot of physical diseases out there that are associated with poor dietary choices. But it's kind of, it's expanding, and it's causing great interest, shall we say. So again, from the same paper, long-term exposure to unhealthy dietary habits can drive depression over the lifetime. So the earlier on, or the younger we are, when we start eating unhealthily, the more risk we are at developing inflammatory conditions. So anything from sort of physical conditions to sort of mental health conditions such as depression and so on. And there is a big relationship between inflammation and chronic disease, and that includes CFS and ME. And so here we are. So we've got neuroinflammation in patients with CFS, ME. Neuroinflammation is literally inflammation in the brain. If you've got inflammation in the brain, it's going to be eating away at various parts of the brain. You're going to get things like brain fog. The brain is our core. It keeps us going. It makes us function. It sends all the signals, tells all the parts of the body what we're supposed to be doing. If we've got inflammation in the brain, we're kind of in trouble. So let's get some anti-inflammatory foods into our diet. So to understand sort of inflammatory diets, we have to understand diet quality. What's a pro-inflammatory diet? What's an anti-inflammatory diet? So to sort of understand very simplistically, pro-inflammatory foods are those that are lower quality. So they consist mainly of things like highly processed snack foods, sugar-sweetened beverages, highly refined white grains, refined sugars, fried foods, foods that are high in saturated and trans fats. Although I say that, but actually the trans fat issue is sort of being dealt with slightly, and we eat a lot less trans fats than we used to. But also diets that are high in high glycemic foods. So these are foods that release huge amounts of sugar and energy very, very quickly. And these include things like potatoes, white bread, white pasta, white rice, white sugar. Anything that's got no color in it is not good for you. Anti-inflammatory foods, on the other hand, are those that are high quality. So they are nutrient rich, and they include things like unrefined, minimally processed, things like fruits and vegetables, whole grain products, healthy fats, and healthy sources of protein. And I'm going to give some examples rather than just sort of say healthy fats and healthy sources. And these are the kind of foods that we should be including more, just as a sort of, just everybody really, not necessarily anybody who's sort of suffering from any sort of health condition, but everybody. Okay, so here's a kind of a bit of a depressing example of some standard sort of pro-inflammatory food. So the sort of fast food junkies, if you like, and the sort of fast food outlets that give us all these rather yellowy, grey, horrible looking foods, but highly addictive. And part of that is because of the relationship that exists between the fat and the type of sugar. They get this sort of ratio of fat to sugar that triggers things and triggers hormones within the brain that make us crave it and make us want more. And it's really, really, really addictive. And I speak to so many people who say, I gave up sugar, and I gave up sugar for, you know, it took me a month to get over it. And do you know what? I felt awful. I felt awful for weeks. And then I started to feel really, really, really good. And it's addictive. It's almost like a drug. But you know what? Half of it really isn't our fault. If we look at how we the packaged and processed foods have become the norm. For example, if we go back and we look in sort of 1950s, there's been a 70% decline in the purchase of flour. Now, on one hand, I'm kind of saying, you know, all sort of flour and sort of baked goods are all not so good. But this is directly attributed to the availability of readily prepared food. So we used to use flour a lot more in the past, in the 1950s, when we used to bake and make our own food. Now there's sort of like, you know, 320,000 different types of packaged foods and drinks that are available on the marketplace. If you go into your average supermarket, you look at all the shelves and you look at how many different products there are, and there's tins and there's packets and there's all sorts of other kind of things. But you look and try to count up how much fresh food is actually in your supermarket. It's a really small percentage. And in fact, this is quite an old sort of study that I've got it from, and it's talking about 2004, so it's about 10 years old. But, you know, the sort of total sales of top products, and this has got worse over the last 10 years, of sort of processed food, things like snacks and canned drinks and stuff, accounted for over 62 billion in sales in the UK. So that's kind of even worse now. So the kind of food choices that we make is generally, or the choices that we make is influenced by the marketing that we're exposed to. But this is how we should be eating, and this is kind of really an example to sort of highlight the different sort of colours and things that we find in what we know are sort of healthy foods. The reason that these foods are so colourful is the nutrients that are in them. There's vitamins, there's minerals, there's polyphenols, there's antioxidants that all contribute to the vibrant colours. And it's really important that if we can, that we eat as much raw food as we can, because we get the nutrient load, we get it into the body, it can get to work really, really efficiently. So when we're talking about sort of fruits and vegetables, we need to be having a diverse amount of fruit and vegetables in our diets. More focus on the vegetables than the fruits. So we have to be a little bit careful. You should be eating about 5 portions a day. 4 portions should be vegetables, 1 portion should be fruit. And the reason for that is that fruit contains something called fructose, which is a natural sugar, but our livers aren't very good at sort of coping with too much fructose, so it's not too good for you. So out of your 5 fruit and veg a day, you should have 4 veg, 1 fruit. And then we need to look at the kind of protein that we are having. So the quality of the protein and the fats within our diets is really, really important. So again, if you go into your local supermarket, the majority of the products on the shelves are going to come from intense farming methods. So if you think about the food, if the food that we eat influences how our bodies function, then the food that the animals and the fish and the chickens and things like that are fed on is going to influence how they behave and the quality of the meat that they produce. So there's a lot more sort of focus on things like organic. There's a lot more focus on eating products that have been grass-fed, so chickens and cattle rather than grain-fed, intensively farmed, should eat their natural diet. And then the meat that they produce is going to be better quality in regards to fat and protein. We should be eating wild fish, not farmed fish. Again, all the nutrients within the food that you're eating is going to influence how your body functions as well. Okay, so there is a sort of pattern that we know that contributes to good health. However, what we find is that the majority of us tend to eat small amounts of very few types of vegetables and fruit. The amount of people in the UK who actually meet their target of their sort of 5 a day is really, really low still. We eat very few whole grain products. Our carbohydrates tend to come from very refined sources. And we generally eat very little oily fish. And we eat very large quantities of very intensively produced meat products and dairy products. So the quality of the food that we eat can really, really, really be improved. So how does it affect things like mood and sort of cognitive function and things like that? And we'll talk about energy as well in a minute. So I've kind of mentioned already that the food that you put into your body gets broken down. It gets broken down into simple building blocks: our carbohydrate, our protein, our fat, and our micronutrients. They can then be broken down into complex and simple sugars. We have amino acids, we have fatty acids, and we have vitamins and minerals, and they all play a really important role. The type of sugars and amino acids and fatty acids that you get from different types of quality of meat and fish and vegetables is going to completely depend on the quality of the food to start with. And when we consider that our brain, this is our sort of functioning it's the kind of big computer in our head, it requires energy. It requires energy in the form of sugar. So the type of sugar is important, actually. We need to fuel our brain at a slow trickle rate. So we need to be putting carbohydrate into our body that is going to be very slow release, so that our brain doesn't get overloaded. Because if we overload it, we then run out, and suddenly the brain hasn't got any energy to sort of function with. So I'll give you some examples of what to eat in a minute. Amino acids. Amino acids are the individual building blocks that produce neurotransmitters. These are the chemical messengers that are involved in memory, concentration, learning, behavior, attention, appetite, mood, sleep, sexual function, all of these things. There are certain amino acids that are found in certain foods. And if you don't have the correct amino acids, if you don't provide what are called the essential amino acids, you don't have the right building blocks. You're not going to be able to produce the right kind of transmitters. Fatty acids, I've already said that fatty acids make up the building blocks of the cells. So our cellular membranes are made up of DHA, for example. And then we have vitamins and minerals. These act as precious cofactors that are involved in actually turning amino acids into proteins that are produced, that then go on to produce these neurotransmitters. If you don't have the right combinations, you will physically and mentally reap the kind of consequences of it. So, sort of in a kind of a simplistic way, If you choose to eat a whole chicken, not like a whole chicken in one go, but if you source your protein from a whole chicken that has been grass-fed and it's organic, it's going to deliver completely different sets of things like fat and nutrients and fatty acids and proteins than if you turn it into a processed chicken nugget. If you eat sort of pork or beef that has been, again, grass-fed, it's going to have a completely different composition to your sort of value sausages. This is not to say that sausages aren't good for you, because it depends on where you've made them from. If you make your own, for example, from good quality meat, it's a good sausage. But generally, sausages tend to be kind of made out of all the sort of like little bits and pieces that are left over. And quite often, sausages don't provide you with the essential amino acids that you need to make things like serotonin and melatonin. And what I find quite frustrating sometimes is when I speak to parents, and these are the foods that they're giving to their children, because they tell me that the children won't eat these. So when we're talking about the earlier you are in your age that you start eating pro-inflammatory, poor quality foods, the more likely you are to develop inflammatory conditions as you get older. The fact that people feed their children these kind of poor quality substitutes to what should really be, they should be eating these, is incredibly frustrating. So the combination of nutrients that you need to sort of generate really good health and well-being are polyunsaturated fatty acids. So these are good fats, particularly sort of omega-3s found in oily fish, but things like olive oil, monounsaturated fatty acid, associated with things like the Mediterranean diet, for example. And then it's to look at the quality of your animal protein. Is it organic? Is it grass-fed? If you feed beef cattle on grass, the quality and the quality of the amino acids, the quality of the fat is completely different, and you can actually taste the difference between a good quality piece of meat and a less quality. Minerals and vitamins as well. So these are things that are sort of found in whole grain foods, meat, fish, leafy green vegetables, fresh food. We need to be looking at foods that are minimally processed. So if you can pick it, pluck it, catch it, eat it. If it comes in a tin, if it comes in a packet, there are some exceptions, and I will talk about those in a minute. We just really need to sort of really focus on what we are putting into our body. Okay, so the first thing, if you want to look after your brain, partly you need to include a good protein source. Like I said, protein is made up of amino acids. There are particular amino acids that are said to be essential. If you don't eat them, your body won't be able to make them. So you need to provide the correct amino acids to produce your neurotransmitters. So if you're getting a good quality source of protein in your diet, it will help things like boost your energy supplies, lift your mood. It will help to promote relaxation, help deal with stress. Protein is very kind of relaxing depending on what type of protein it is. Combining protein with complex carbohydrates is really important as well. Protein slows down the way that sugar is absorbed into the bloodstream, so it keeps our brains sort of tickling over with the sort of supply of energy. And then we need to sort of supply vegetables and a little bit of fruit for the cofactors that are required. So what happens when we eat protein? Protein, broken down, we get a particular type of amino acid called tryptophan. Tryptophan plays a massive role in regulating brain function in regards to keeping us happy and helping us sleep. Right, okay, so high tryptophan foods include things like nuts and seeds. Vegetarian sources are things like tofu. We've got cheese, red meat for the non-vegetarians, chicken. Turkey actually has one of the highest meat sources of tryptophan, and eggs as well. But you can find it in fish, oats, beans, lentils, and eggs. So there's lots of different sources of tryptophan. when we get tryptophan in the body, tryptophan gets converted to something called 5-HTP. We need cofactors such as magnesium, zinc and B6, again things like leafy green vegetables, get your veg in, produces serotonin. Serotonin produces melatonin. The impact of this is that if you're getting plenty of quality protein, plenty of tryptophan, it will help with things like mood and sleep. Interestingly, you can supplement with all of these as well. So if your diet is a little bit lacking, I'm getting told that the sound is failing. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I will carry on. Everybody else okay? Okay, all right. Okay, so things like tryptophan, you can get supplements, 5-HTP, serotonin, even melatonin. And these are all quite effective, to be honest, as well. So we can do it through diet, we can do it through a little bit through supplements. Okay, so carbohydrates, what kind of carbohydrates should be eating? Okay, brain needs fuel, I've kind of talked about this, at a constant rate. And we can divide our carbohydrates into the effect that they have on our blood sugar levels. So we've got carbohydrates that break down really, really quickly. And our top banana of the carbohydrates is white refined sugar. If you eat white refined sugar, it literally just throws energy into our bloodstream, which has really sort of bad effects on things like insulin. People who eat huge amounts of carbohydrate that are sort of white sugary sort of based tend to put themselves at a high risk of sort of metabolic syndrome, type 2 diabetes. It's not good. Carbohydrates, on the other hand, that break down slowly, release their glucose gradually, are said to have a low GI. And actually, if you can buy books on this, or you can actually find some food products now that actually will tell you that they are either high GI or low GI. And if you're diabetic or if you have metabolic syndrome, you can actually sort of help sort of regulate some of the issues with that by modulating your glycemic index or eating sort of correctly in regards to your sort of carbohydrate intake. But the importance of this is a little bit of glucose, slow release, fuel your brain slowly. So I think we all kind of have got the message that sugar or refined sugar is not good for us. But what sugar is it's highly inflammatory. The more processed, the more refined your carbohydrate is, the faster it gets into your digestive system, and the bigger the sugar rush. Now, sugar floats around in your system, it floats around in your blood supply, and it's sticky on the outside, it's going to stick to the inside of your blood vessels as well. And this is what happens, is you end up with developing products called sort of glycemic or glycolated end products. And they bump around in your system, and they actually kind of can initiate an inflammatory response. Not good. Okay, so poor regulation of glucose and insulin, for example, is a breeding ground for inflammation. If you want to really fuel your health condition, no matter what it is, you get plenty of sugar in your system, and you will really drive it rather than get better. So we need to be cutting sugar out. You need to get rid of sugar. And part of the issue with sugar is it's inflammatory. You end up producing products called cytokines. And interestingly as well, our little friend cortisol crops up again, because cortisol is a stress hormone. Cortisol disrupts our normal production of serotonin. Cortisol throws tryptophan away, and inflammatory products drive tryptophan away from producing 5-HTP. And in fact, both an inflammatory product and cortisol make tryptophan produce something called kyuranine. Kyuranine then enters a completely different pathway that really mucks up brain function. So it's highly inflammatory. So really is going to sort of interfere with things like mood and sleep. And again, we find that people with chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, depression, all tend to have low levels of omega-3 fatty acids. They have low serotonin, low 5-HTP. It really impacts on things like mood and sleep. So if you can increase things like tryptophan, if you can lower inflammation, if you can lower stress, then you can increase this pathway down here and make massive improvements on things like mood and sleep. Right, okay, so where do we find our pro-inflammatory carbohydrates? I should think, what is a good GI level? I'll answer some questions at the end, actually, if that's okay. Okay, so pro-inflammatory carbohydrates include sugar of all sorts, white rice, anything that's refined or enriched is going to be sort of pro-inflammatory. And you know what? It's those typical things that we all kind of reach for when we're feeling a little bit down, when we maybe don't have very much energy, when we can't have the energy to cook. And this is not necessarily sort of when you're ill. You know, this is everybody. You know, you reach for things like, you know, a cake or a biscuit or something that's quite simple, but it really just sort of fuels the whole sort of process of inflammation. Anti-inflammatory carbohydrates on the whole are those that are in unrefined. They come pre-packaged the way that nature designed them to be. Fruit, vegetables, beans, legumes, anything that is picked, plucked, is going to be healthy for you. Anti-inflammatory carbohydrates, apples, plums, berries, all of these lovely, lovely fruits and vegetables are naturally brimming with nutrients, vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients, antioxidants that are going to help with sort of supporting immune function. They are going to help with sort of combating high levels of inflammation in the body. And also, this is where we sort of talk a little bit about leaky gut syndrome as well. I'm not going to go too much into it, but the type of carbohydrate that you choose to put in your body can also affect things like gut disorders, leaky gut syndrome. This is partly because the type of carbohydrate that you put into your body will affect how much fiber you get. Fiber is the food that you provide for all the lovely bacteria that sit within your gut that keep things sort of ticking over and keep you healthy. If you don't feed your healthy gut flora, then it's going to allow your non-healthy gut flora, so the bad guys, to populate. You get high levels of inflammation. You then get sort of breakings up in the sort of the natural tight bonds that exist between the cells. You get little gaps, your food gets through, leaky gut syndrome, all kind of gets. Yes, hi everybody, yes, you can have a copy by email and it's being recorded. Okay, so anyway, so we need to be looking after our guts. The type of fiber that we eat is really important as well. Okay, so how do we optimize gut function? Complex carbohydrates, so and also fermented foods. So you don't necessarily even have to take probiotics and things like that. Probiotics, just to clarify, are good healthy gut flora. So you can take those. They're fortified in things like yogurts and stuff like that. Prebiotics are the foods that the probiotics need. And we can provide those in our diet, and we can provide them through supplements as well. Fermented foods, you're probably not familiar with these kind of things like kombucha, kefir. These are sort of very sort of like, they're almost like yogurty sort of drinks that you can buy as well now, or you can make your own. And it's also important to recognize as well that the gut, actually, there's a big relationship that goes on between the gut and the brain. And in fact, your gut produces more mood regulating serotonin than your brain does. So if you can't produce serotonin within your gut as well because your guts are unhealthy, then it's going to impact even more. Okay, so I kind of talked a lot about omega-3s, so I'm probably going to kind of skip a little bit here. But basically, if you're not getting enough omega-3s, then it's going to compromise your brain function. We know that deficiencies in omega-3s, for example, are associated with a lot of brain, so neurological conditions, anything through food, conditions such as children's developmental disorders, depression, schizophrenia, dementia, that kind of thing. So what's good what's good fats? Good fats: coconut oil, olive oil, rapeseed oil, butter, flaxseed oil, fish oil are all rich in things like medium chain triglycerides, really healthy for you. They're a really good source of energy. Olive oil is renowned as the sort of Mediterranean oil, rich in omega-9. So is rapeseed oil. Butter is really good for you, but go for grass-fed, really rich in omega-3. Flaxseed is a veggie source of omega-3. Fish is a non-veggie, long-chain omega-3. Grapeseed oil is really good anti-inflammatory, actually. What you want to avoid are the nasty omega-6 containing fats. So things like vegetable oils, canola oils, sunflower oils, margarine oils. We never really were intended to consume these. These are kind of like burst into our diets. Canola is rapeseed oil, that's true. Oh, it is a bit, sorry, yes. But I'm going to burn. Coconut products are good for you. Coconut oil and coconut fat. So it depends. If you're looking at coconut products, things like desiccated coconut is not kind of the coconut that I would sort of normally, so not desiccated coconut, that kind of thing, because that's high in sugar. Coconut oil that you would use to, say, fry in, for example. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. So the next thing really is, how our diets have changed in respect to sort of omega-6 to omega-3. So if you consider that omega-6 to omega-3 is our pro-anti-inflammatory balance, our hunter-gatherers used to have a 6:3 ratio of about 1:1. It's now 25:1. Consequence of this, and this kind of highlights it as well. So here's our omega-3, it's gone down. Our omega-6 has gone up because we eat so much nasty vegetable oils and things like that, and they're added to so many different types of foods as well. You eat so many different types of foods. When you're buying processed food, you don't know what you're putting into your body. Okay. So hunter-gatherers, nice and balanced, Western style, not so balanced, high inflammation. Okay. So get more fish into your diet if you can. 2 portions of oily fish is really important. Go for short living, small fish, things like anchovies, sardines, mackerel, that kind of thing. And these are affordable as well. Really good quality fish, oily fish, rich in and lots of different nutrients as well. So not only is fish really good source of EPA and DHA, but it's a rich source of protein, tryptophan, which produces our serotonin and melatonin. Another one, phenylalanine, which is the precursor to dopamine. It's also rich in things like B vitamins, selenium, that are required to make all the sort of neurotransmitters and things. 2 portions of fish a week. 2 portions of oily fish a week. That's all we're supposed to kind of have to keep things ticking over. And the majority of us don't even. The average intake of oily fish is something like 54 grams a week, and we should be having 120 grams of oily fish. It's not very much at all, but it's quite surprising how many people don't eat oily fish. Okay, so again, so it's that kind of thing of, if you don't eat oily fish, or if you think oily fish is difficult to get into your diet, then have a little bit of think about fish oils. And in fact, EPA, which is our salmon is oily fish. Yeah, it's good. It's good. If you can go for sort of like wild salmon, it's even better, because you get more omega-3s in wild fish than you do in farmed fish. Okay, so EPA, really, really good. What is your... Right, if you just bear with me, and I'll answer all your questions in just a second. I'm nearly at the end of the slide. So EPA, omega-3, really beneficial in treating chronic fatigue syndrome, and it's been shown in many different types of studies. You bypass delta-6, it's massively antiviral, and it's massively anti-inflammatory. And in fact, if we just go back to my earlier slide, if you take EPA supplements, and there's lots and lots of studies that have shown this, EPA reduces cortisol levels, so it reduces stress. EPA decreases inflammation. If you decrease inflammation, you get positive brain changes. And in fact, people who eat lots of omega-3 and lots of fish tend to naturally have bigger brains. It's as simple as that. So if you start eating a lot more fish, what you'll find is that you actually start to sort of rejuvenate brain synapses and things like that. If you get positive brain changes, you actually get improved cognitive function. One of the key benefits of taking EPA supplements generally is on brain fog. It decreases inflammation, you get improved mood. Because if you're decreasing inflammation, you're allowing tryptophan, amino acid that makes serotonin, to carry on and make serotonin. If you make serotonin, you get improved mood. Some of that serotonin gets converted to melatonin, you get improved sleep. If you decrease inflammation, you get improvements in adrenal fatigue. So you get less cortisol, your adrenals get a little bit of a rest, you get improved immunity, and your viral activity is also improved as well. So EPA supplements can actually combat viruses, but you're actually indirectly improving your immunity as well. Brilliant. Okay, I'll talk about krill as well. Right, okay, I'm going to just go through these very briefly as well, because there's quite an interesting list here, and then I'm going to talk about how to eat well. Okay, so just as an example, if anybody wants some information on anything in particular, email me. I'll give you a little bit of kind of advice about sort of what supplements, dosing and stuff like that, but just for your interest. So lots of neurotransmitter support, things like 5-HTP, omega-3, St. John's wort, something called SAMe, which is S-adenosylmethionine, which is a precursor to serotonin. Just as a word of advice, anybody taking antidepressants shouldn't take St. John's wort or SAMe or 5-HTP. So, but if you're not taking antidepressants, then they're quite good as well, and obviously EPA in there. And then there's something called L-threonine. This is found in green tea. For 5 cups a day will help you help with things like mood and cognitive function, but it's also really good for relaxing as well. And in fact, green tea also contains something else called EGCG, which is a wonderful antioxidant. So get the green. Some people think green tea tastes awful, but it's certainly worth getting a few cups into your diet if you can, because it's really good for you. Things like magnesium, B complex, good quality B complex. If you want some advice about what's a good B complex, no, green tea has got minimal caffeine in it. Okay, and then EPA. So if you want any information on supplements, yes, tyrosine is good. Okay, right, okay. And then things like liver support. So you need to be getting your antioxidant levels. Glutathione, for example, is our main detox. One thing that we have with CFS-ME is that we have this sort of total toxin overload. And if your liver is sluggish, then you're not going to be able to cope with it. N-acetylcysteine is a precursor to glutathione. B complex is really, really good because it's involved in something called methylation, which helps us to produce lots of antioxidants. But again, if you want information, do email me. I can give you a little bit more detail. Gut function, things like prebiotics and probiotics. If you've got leaky gut, something called L-glutamine is really, really good as well. It's really good for healing the gut, reducing inflammation, and then that lets your probiotics sort of get to grips. Energy support, particularly for mitochondrial function. And again, anybody who's sort of familiar with Sarah Myhill's work will find that she kind of lists all of these as well. So again, if you want any information on these, do email me. Lipoic acid, vitamin C, ubiquinol. Ubiquinol is really important. So if you're looking for CoQ10, not all CoQ10s are the same. You want ubiquinol, not the standard CoQ10. Resveratrol, found in things like red wine, but not too much red wine. Really good for you. Astaxanthin. Now, astaxanthin is a really powerful antioxidant, and it's found in krill oil. And in fact, and I know that somebody's asked me asked about krill oil supplements, and I will talk about those in a minute. But the massive benefits that really are attributed to krill oil actually come from the astaxanthin, not necessarily from the omega-3s found in krill oil. Because if you look at how much EPA and DHA you get in krill oil, it's minute. It's really not very much. The anti-inflammatory health benefits of krill oil are really centered around the astaxanthin. So don't concentrate on krill oil too much for omega-3 benefits. But if you want it as an antioxidant, then yeah, it's great because it's rich in astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is what makes shrimp pink, by the way. The birds that stand on one leg, flamingos. Flamingos are pink because they eat so much krill, which is rich in astaxanthin. Just thought I'd pop that one in. And then something called carnosine. Carnosine helps. It's something that helps to shuttle fat into our cells to give us an energy boost. Right. Okay. So one of the issues that we have, obviously, is going to be about what we actually eat. So I've talked a little bit about some of the nutrients. So what do we eat, and how can we afford to eat well? Because we don't all have, certainly if you have CFS-ME, many people will actually be on a bit of a benefit on sort of restricted amounts of money. Some people will be on benefits. It's really difficult to be able to sort of work out how we eat well. So how do we do it? Right, the first thing is have a look at what you're eating, and if you can make some dietary choices, just cutting down on some of these unhealthy foods. They offer very little nutritional benefit, and they can actually exacerbate feelings of sort of symptoms, including things like depression, for example. Remember, we want to supply our bodies with as much nutrition as possible. If you eat things like sweets, cakes, crisps, and fizzy drinks, stuff like that, it just takes everything out, and then we end up. What you do is, if you eat sweets and cakes and crisps that have the nutrients removed, they enter your body, and then they go, right, okay, to be able to be digested and just to sort of get out of the system, we need vitamins and minerals, and they strip your body. So eating these kind of eating these kind of foods can actually have a detrimental impact on your health, because they can sort of just leach your body of nutrients. Get rid of them. Right. So then let's look at sort of planning. The first thing to sort of think about is, how can I do this the most effectively? And kind of organising and trying meal planning. I'm terrible because I tend to do things on a very sort of spontaneous level, and I can be quite wasteful and sort of going shopping, and it's like I don't plan and write lists and things like that. And I get so much more focused, and I actually save a lot more money and only buy what I really need if I'm organised. If you're spending on a budget, then don't go for impulse stuff. Supermarkets are so clever. They make us spend on absolute stuff that we really don't need. Don't go to the supermarket hungry either. Or if you don't get to go to the supermarket, then things like buying online can be really good. And if you've got a friend that you can maybe budget with, you can take advantage of things like buy one and get one free offers. Although I'm saying that most of the buy one get one free offers things are on the kind of foods that you wouldn't normally choose to eat. Okay. Right. Nutrient content of the foods that we eat. So fruit and vegetables, for example, they diminish really, really quickly. Only try to pick and buy the quantities that you need if you can. You can listen to the recording. It will be available to you. You'll probably receive an email. Okay, things like fresh fruit and vegetables can be much better value. frozen vegetables tend to be more nutrient rich as well, and they're really convenient. You can have them in your freezer. Sorry, you can just take a little handful as you need them. Fresh vegetables, be really careful. Look at where you're getting them from, because if they're transported, like sort of like things like bananas and things like that, they come so many miles. How can they be fresh when you finally eat them? Your local markets, your local greengrocers, you can kind of get organic boxes as well. Offer much better value and more likely to be locally sourced. And it's good to support the community as well. If you're lucky like me to have a little bit of land and you've got the energy to be able to do it, and you can do it, grow your own veg, forage for free. It's really, really good. Our own land, great, land grass-fed, excellent. I'll be looking at that. Okay. Right. The other thing is, like, if you're looking at salads, and it's like everybody tends to cook everything, eat raw. Eat as much raw as you can. It will provide as much nutrients. Okay, so some of these pictures that I'm going to show you are the foods that I eat. So I've got raw asparagus, I've got raw cabbage, I've grown my own seeds, green beans. This is a courgette. You don't have to cook everything, and not all salads have to be things like tomatoes and cucumbers and stuff like that. This is nutrient packed, and I've chucked a few lentils in there as well for some protein. This was my breakfast the other day. This is a high protein yogurt. It's got some blueberries, a little bit of honey, some nuts and seeds. You're getting a bit of omega-3. Blueberries really rich if they're more locally sourced, but anyway, so it's a good quality breakfast. Toast, cereals, no way. Okay. This is my lunch the other day. This is nice, some raw broccoli here. We've got spinach, we've got some nuts and seeds, some cranberries, a bit of tomato, celery, a couple of chicken legs. Lovely. Protein, we've got things like quinoa, can never pronounce that, a bit of quinoa, a little bit of salmon there, chickpeas, a bit of kale, all of these sort of really nutrient-rich foods. And then this was the soup that I made on Sunday, and this was my lunch today. Lots of different ingredients can provide you with lots of different types of nutrients. So tomatoes and carrots, they comprise of different nutrients that are going to provide you with different health benefits. So it's just sort of an example of some foods. Okay, so not everybody has the kind of money to sort of spend on things like organic, grass-fed. I emphasize it so much, but I do understand that whilst they're the healthiest options, not everybody can afford them. But you don't have to eat meat all the time. Choosing protein sources such as proteins and soy products can be much cheaper than meat, and they can offer sort of additional nutrients that are not found in meat. Or you can have a little bit of meat and bulk it out with things like pulses and things like that. Different cuts, shirt, flank, shin. Offal as well. Offal is full of things like coenzyme Q10, other sort of nutrients as well, contribute to sort of energy and sort of mitochondrial function. Tinned fish. I know that I've kind of said, oh, if it comes in a tin, it's not good, but it's kind of compromised with some things as well. Tend to be sort of tinned sardines and things like that tend to be less played with, if you like, than some of the sort of tinned things that you can get. I generally, if I'm making things like soups, I tend to cook in bulk, and I freeze in portions, and I just grab something out of the fridge as I need it. And especially it's really good for when you don't feel like cooking. It doesn't have to be expensive to eat well, and that's the real sort of key to it. Okay, right. Eating the right foods can improve memory, mood, and energy levels, as well as improve sleep. So it is possible. It's not necessarily to say that making improvements in your diet is going to make all your symptoms go away, but it should help to improve. Okay, so this is the last couple of slides now, really, and this is kind of just to emphasize the fact that we do acknowledge that not everybody can feel like, obviously always feels like eating. If you don't feel like eating, it's really important to understand that your body needs nutrients. And you need to try to eat a little bit often. So we can look at things like high nutrient rich soups that, again, you can sort of get out of the freezer if you've made them in advance. You can add a bit of sort of protein powder and things to soups, and a little bit of things like medium chain triglycerides, such as that found in coconut oil. Coconut oil, as a quick tip here, is really good for an energy hit. So if you're feeling really lethargic and you need some energy, adding a dollop of coconut oil into things like soups and smoothies, it's type of fat that it's labeled as saturated, but it doesn't go through the natural kind of digestive process that other fats do. So you don't store it as fat, you burn it as energy. So it's really good. If you add protein powders to things like sort of smoothies and soups as well, and sort of give you a real sort of energy boost. So if you don't feel like eating, you don't necessarily have to do cooking or chopping. You can just bung things into blenders and you can still get a lot of real a sort of nutrient hit to sort of help get things like energies and the antioxidants and the anti-inflammatories that are going to help your system cope with your condition. Okay, so my top tips. Right, an anti-inflammatory diet is core to treating symptoms. You need to get at least 5 fruits and vegetables. So 4 veg, 1 fruit. And if you can, eat raw, okay? Choose whole foods, right? Okay, not refined foods, because these are anti-nutrients. Choose your fats wisely. Get a little bit of omega-6, increase your omega-3. Things like olive oil, really good, omega-9. Choose your quality protein. So, you know, eat your chicken, not your chicken nuggets, that kind of thing. Small portions regularly. And oh, sorry, I'm just looking at the, yes, that's about 80 grams, a little handful, a little small handful. Okay, and use supplements, you know, where appropriate. You know, if the key really is your food. Look at your food, look at the changes that you can make. Some people find that supplements are really useful to sort of top up, or, you know, supplements where maybe they're not so prevalent in sort of foods that we eat. Okay, so that's the end of the webinar. If anybody, this is me. This was a nice sunny day in the back garden. This is my email address. Feel free to please contact me if you've got any questions. I'm just going to have a quick look back through and see if I can sort of find any questions that I can answer right now. Okay. Use fermented foods. Fermented foods, you'd have to check whether they were sort of yeast containing or not. You might be better off looking at a direct probiotic. Oh, right, okay. Long-term antibiotics are going to have like a major impact on your gut function. So certainly to Anne, you would definitely need to look at a really good quality probiotic and prebiotic. If you want to give me your contact details, if you want to contact me, I can sort of give you a bit of advice on what you would need to sort of supplement with as well. Coconut products are good. I kind of think I answered that one. It depends on what you mean by a coconut product. Desiccated coconut is not a coconut product in my view, because it's processed. Yeah, they've turned lovely, raw, beautiful coconut into something that is, yeah, shouldn't be eaten. So coconut oil, coconut butter, anything like that is going to be really good for you. Okay, salmon is an oily fish, yes. Right, okay, olive oil, right, okay. Any oil that is liquid because it contains what we call double bond, so it makes the fatty acids fluid. If it's got a double bond, then it is susceptible to something called lipid peroxidation, which produces free radicals. So anything that any fat that is likely to increase oxidation is going to be not particularly beneficial for cooking. So yes, the best fats to cook with are saturated fats. So it's better actually to cook with butter or coconut oil. They are the most stable, but adding a little bit of butter to olive oil is probably going to be better. Right, and yeah, olive oil is probably, it's only got one monounsaturated, it's only got one double bond, so it's not as good. Green tea has got less caffeine in it than standard black tea or coffee. Right, okay, so Rachel Young, I think you have been given some really good tips on cookbooks, and yeah, Dale Pinnock is one of the better ones as well. I'm not familiar with Hemsley and Hemsley, but I am familiar with Dale Pinnock's, and he does some really good sort of diet recipes, sort of for healing as well. And Barbara, I am going to copy your link and have a look at your grass-fed meat as well, because I may well be passing the Lake District at some point, so although I'm sure you probably deliver as well. Okay. Ooh. Right, and grass-fed organic meat tends to be not that available and more expensive. Actually, you can get a lot of it online now, to be honest with you. If you look online, it's getting a lot more popular and a lot more affordable. I mean, one of the things that I hear from people is that it is really expensive. And to be honest with you, it kind of is. But like I say, you don't have to be eating meat every single day. I'd rather have one portion of organic grass-fed meat once or twice a week, and then sort of possibly top it up with other sources of protein as well. So it is possible to eat well, and it is possible to eat affordably. I think everybody gets a little bit kind of caught up in everything sort of being really highly expensive, and it's really not. Okay. Amitriptyline is a, this is for Barbara, amitriptyline is a SSRI, so you can't really take 5-HTP. Ah, right, okay, so fiber is really good. Partly it's because it kind of bulks out our feces and it kind of gets all of the sort of toxins out, but also it's fiber provides the fuel that our beneficial bacteria require, and so by kind of feeding our good bacteria, we actually naturally start to produce anti-inflammatory products. So fiber is really good in regards to sort of regulating inflammation, and sort of one of the key benefits of adding lots of fiber to your diet is its role in sort of reducing your risk of developing colorectal cancer, for example. It's majorly anti-inflammatory. It's really good for you. It gets bowels moving nice and regularly as well. So we don't want to be storing any of those toxins. We want to be getting them out. Okay, right. Peak District, yay. Right, I think. How much is D-ribose? Ah, right, okay, so D-ribose, I don't know. D-ribose you can get online. To be honest with you, I'm not sure of the cost of it. It's not something that I generally recommend that much myself. I know that you need around about 5 grams a day, and you also need B12 alongside it as well. So no, it's not. I'm looking at this. There's a lovely little conversation going on online between you guys. Thank you very much, everybody, for your kind words. How do you grass feed a chicken or a pig? Well, I don't think necessarily. It's more about sort of, well, free range, for example, free range chickens are going to be eating their normal diet, so sort of they will pick grass. I've actually got chickens, and they eat everything, and I kind of, if they go mad in my garden, they eat all of my vegetables. I'm not sure how you grass feed a pig, but I guess it's more about sort of feeding it on its natural diet rather than sort of artificial diets. Tried coconut oil, not rapeseed. Okay, so it's more about. Can you talk more about omega-3 test results? Yes, I can. Right. Okay. Yes. So it is actually possible if you aren't sure about. Everybody, you can get a copy of it. All you've got to do is contact us. My web address is here. You will probably get a thank you. There'll be a little slide at the end when we log out that will invite you to maybe give a comment. But you'll definitely get an invite to get the slides, and they'll probably be available as a recording as well. How do you know if you have leaky gut? Generally, kind of like sort of major sort of inflammatory symptoms. So things like poor digestion, a little bit of bloating, possibly. Quite often, things like headaches can be a sort of side effect. If there's go back to my slide, maybe. Kind of gives a bit of. Oh, there we go. Right. So, gut inflammation. So you get sort of inflamed gut causes nutrients waste to leak. So you get sort of food intolerances and things like that. But okay. If you have an intolerance to dairy, kefir. Do you know what? I'm not so sure that it is. Unless I don't think kefir would be suitable if you have an intolerance to dairy. Ah, right, Barbara. It's a tricky one. I mean, if you can, in regards to sort of supplements, you'd probably have to look at where your symptoms are really kind of focused. So if it's sort of fatigue, then you might want to kind of consider sort of how you can. It would be. Okay. Oh, it's quite interesting, actually. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce your name, so you have to forgive me if I. Is it Lucia? The nice nurse in electric colorectal surgery ward. It's quite interesting, actually, because we have a pure Hpa product that at the moment is being used by Leeds University. It's being used in something called the seafood polyp prevention diet. And Hpa is actually really important as well for sort of managing sort of the side effects associated with cancer cachexia. So if you want to give me, if you want to contact me directly, I can certainly give you lots of information on sort of not just sort of anti-inflammatory diets, but sort of EPA as well. So anybody who wants any information, please feel free to get in contact with me. Just as a quick note to let you know that I will be away next week. So if you email me Monday onwards, I probably might not get back to you until the week after. But if you email me this week, then I will certainly get back to you. Although I'm going to Food Matters Live tomorrow, so I won't be around during the day tomorrow. But I will be available to be contacted on Thursday and Friday. Right, okay. Right. Right, okay. I'm kind of aware of how much I've actually overrun in tonight's webinar. So I just want to say a really good thank you to everybody who's sort of dedicated almost 2 hours to listening to me talk tonight. Again, if there's any questions that I might have missed, please do email me and I will get back to you and sort of, if I don't know the answers, I can certainly find them out, but I'll be more than happy to help. Great, thank you. Thank you very much for your kind comments. And I will say now, thank you very much, and a very good evening to you, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.